Her Bak Egyptian Initiate, the seventh day. Her Bak asked his master to summarize the factors that constitute man on earth and in the duat. If I could put everything in a rigid scheme, the sage replied, what would it amount to? Words. Notions evoking images that don't conform with reality. You can't isolate the bodies and states we have talked about. The human being is an egg in perpetual gestation. The names we give them merely denote transitory conditions which pass into one another often enough and can be named otherwise. Earth receives the light of the sun and moon, but they are the same light. Throughout these talks, I have discussed each state at the suitable time. You will be able to connect what is relevant, but resist the temptation to define and separate, or you will go wrong. It is the dispersal of our theme that troubles you, because you try to grasp it outside yourself. If you would build something solid, don't work with wind. Always look for a fixed point, something you know is stable, yourself. Your bodily form is an illusory solid, perishable. What caused it is a real solid, the Djed, word of Amon-Ra Ptah, established in you and become your own. This Djed, word or pillar of Osiris, is the base of relative stability, principle of whatever is durable in the Osirian world, the world of becoming and return. It is for you to make it eternal, your own Djet, secure against agents of destruction. Master, what is the Djet? You've said nothing about this. Can I speak of the end before the beginning? The Djet is the inborn word, shut up in the lowest depths of mortality, awakened, freed, and become your essential, incorruptible body. This awakening is the mystery of mysteries, the secret of resurrection, and I shall only speak of it because it is a link without which the chain would be incomplete. But if the rites of Osiris teach men how to form the immortal body, we teach also that the Djet remains prisoner of Earth and Osiris until Ra comes to deliver it. Untie the ropes and undoes the knots. The two principles of Ra Osiris have been from the beginning the life-givers of the human Djed. We symbolize them as the souls of Ra and Osiris shut up in the physical Djed or pillar. They are two currents of universal life whose source is one, though they are two in the creature. There is an image of the Djed, the base of relative stability, the principle of all duration in the Osirian world. The pharaoh offers it cloths which will dress it. They differentiate the two fires, Nefer of the dual Osirian Djed, as they differentiate the two eyes and the two luminaries. This duality is the cause of terrestrial continuity, recurrent existence, and the endless metamorphosis of the Osirian way. To escape from such slavery, the solar soul must absorb the Osirian. The universe must vanquish the particular. You have two eyes, Her Bak. Their function is sight, Ma. It is by insight that this word is sometimes written with two eyes and the falx or sickle-shaped membrane between them, for looking would give a double image were it not joined up in the brain. The two eyes are stimulated by the dual fire that runs up the dorsal column. The light of Ra quickens your right eye, while your left belongs to your Osirian Ka. When a man is united with his higher ka, the left eye becomes the eye of Ma'at, from whom this ka derives. Then may take the place of union of Ra with Ma'at, which lights the third, the Horus eye, the eye of intuitive vision. There is no longer double sight, and union in the personal Ma'at follows. You understand now the symbol of Pharaoh's frontal uraeus. It is the third eye, the eye of Horus. Does this image symbolize an extraordinary power that is Pharaoh's? Say rather that it belongs to the perfect man of whom the ideal Pharaoh is the symbol. It is power itself through the victory of real over illusory sight. When the personal ka is taught and ruled by the higher ka, and the two consciousnesses are fused. The texts tell us that this total ka, one with its indestructible Djet, will, with the soul's help, become the leaven that can work in the other and lower kas, feed on them and transmute them to its own spiritual nature. Does this refer to man's life on earth or in the duat? It can only be done in the duat if it has been more or less accomplished within what is possible on earth. Note that I have drawn special attention to what is the aim and perfection of human life. In the mass of earthly men, only a few who are of, quote, those in the know, unquote, can aspire to it. The rest, ignorant or still governed by instinct, must still suffer the troubling alternations of earth and the duat. For them, ignorance of the end that makes man the centre of his world renders beginning and end, birth and death, incomprehensible. They know nothing of the factors that come together in the human being, or of the dissociation that terminates his existence. If you would know yourself, Her Bak, take yourself as starting point and go back to its source. Your beginning will disclose your end. In reality, you are the sum of the life of Ammon, because you embody kas of all nature in your humanity. Now, Ptah, ka of the Trinity, Ammon, Ra, Ptah, creates nature's bodies and kas. And it is the kas of nature that make the body of Ammon. Why do you say Ammon, not Ammon, Ra, Ptah? Because while the three are one, Ammon is the western aspect of which one phase is fulfilled for earth. At one time, the worship of Ptah and the image of Min symbolized an earlier phase of incarnation. Now there rises on the horizon a hope of a solar dawn, of which Ra will be the symbol. This cosmic sequence is repeated in the successive phases of an individual destiny. Look on your ostensible self, Her Bak, as a statue of flesh that encloses and hides the multiple aspects of the living you. At your beginning, from the moment of conception, Khnum shaped your egg as he shaped the world egg, but before it could take bodily form, he shaped it in essence with the ideas of your limbs and organs, helped by the forces at work when you were conceived. Then he wrapped it in skins, and each fold took the impression of the cosmic force that was relevant. What am I to understand by the skins? Here it isn't a question of membranes, but of exudations, more or less subtle, aerial, or fluid, that derive from the embryo or its mother, from earth or heaven that is. Each is a state, atmosphere, envelope, or a skin that sometimes surrounds, sometimes imbues an embryo, a star, or a grain, according to its function and subtlety. Whether it is the ammonian water of Nu or the aerial envelope of Ammon, they correspond respectively, with the liquid that bathes the embryo and the membrane that contains it. Another envelope, formed later, derived from the embryo by means of which the mother transmits nourishing humours, is equivalent to the lunar atmosphere that surrounds Earth. Finally, an outermost envelope produces all the child's skins, external and internal. The newborn keeps only the latest of the material skins, but all the cosmic states that make the embryo's envelopes in their image remain part of the child and becomes subtle states of the living being. When you know how to read our riddles, you will discover innumerable details regarding the connection of these states with the organs and nervous centres and their becoming in the duat. Just now, I must limit myself to strictly necessary examples. René Nutet and Meskhent play their part in the formation of the egg embryo. Your essential name was transmitted by René Nutet, who, in the name of your own cycle and personal rhythm, formed and nursed the car of your human personality whose character resides in the liver. Meskhent is the skin of rebirth that relates through the mother to the form that will be the shade of the spiritual car, as the moon is shade to the sun. This has its cradle in the spleen, where the white blood of Osiris is made, whereas the red blood is made in the liver, but gets its life from the heart and lungs through Nefer, the life of Amun-Ra. The sensitive soul, your animal Ba, is thus carried by the blood. Your heart, Ib-Hati, emotive and intermediary centre between your divine and your lower Ka, is its seat. How difficult it is, Her Bak exclaimed, to distinguish the aspects of the Ka. Aspects is the right word. Their diversity isn't in the cause, but in the effects. If you reflect the sun in mirrors of different metals, it will take different colours and qualities. Each Ka that proceeds from Ma'at takes its character in the man who embodies it from the vital forces or natural, organic and instinctive Kas it finds there, and from the innate consciousness of the Tek. When there is reincarnation, Meskhent and René Nutet contribute earlier registrations and the destiny that flows from them. The man who is ignorant of his spiritual world has few or no connections with his divine Ka. His personal Ka is reduced to the sum of his lower Kas, and after death it will be his shade. But the quest for spirit and the development of consciousness gradually changes the quality of the personal Ka, until the time comes when, through the awakening of the spirit, the man gains contact with his divine Ka and the tyranny of the lower diminishes. This is the simplest explanation I can give of the Ka's reality after many repetitive statements regarding relative forces without which the terms of my explanation could have been misconstrued. I understand, cried Her Bak. It isn't possible during life on Earth to define the aspects of the Ka precisely because they have a part in all the activities of the being. It is the agent of the Tek's consciousness, ever-present witness to the metamorphosis of the creature, said the sage. It is the personality written in the liver and signed in the skin by Seshat. It shares the emotional reactions of the heart and the animal Kas. It is fed by the Kas of foodstuffs and enriched by the jewel fire of the vertebral column. It gives the energy or vitality called Sa, while its divine consciousness or knowledge is called Sia. I see now, said Her Bak, how much a man can gain during a lifetime. But what becomes of the envelopes or centres of registration at death? It depends on the state they are in when the man leaves them. The disengaged shade is seen as the impure form of the individual ka. The word impure is used in the sense of double-natured, not homogeneous, destructible. Because it contains an admixture of spirit, it is affected by the body through unexhausted instinctive affinities. It has memories of the desirous Sethian thirst and the exultant thirst of the heart. It holds something of the hereditary gem that the mother embodies in the spleen, and something of the personal form inherited from the father by incarnation in the liver. The first will be felt in the emotional reactions of the heart and written into the heart consciousness, tek. That is why it is said, in allusion to the mystery of the tek, quote, "O my heart of my mother, you are the ka of my metamorphosis," unquote. The heart consciousness is the permanent witness to vital experience in a man's lives and transformations. The second inheritance, paternal, personal, permeates every cell of the being and disengages at death, keeping the dead man's form. This duality constitutes the shade. In the case of an ordinary man, it lasts as long as the carnal body, but the man who is master of his ka frees himself from the shade more quickly, having exhausted the instinctive affinities that made him its slave. Our texts are full of details regarding the becoming of the higher emotional body. One can also speak of the liberation of the djet, the body of functions or functional netters, become conscious in such a mode that a man can say truly, quote, "My thighs are like newt, my feet like ptah, I am newt in her name of," unquote. Her Bak held his breath. Is this then the mysterious djet? It is the aspect I can show you today. Its name should seize your attention. Djed means a word. Then the word, isn't every function a word, a functional netter or attribute of the creative cause? Djet, conscious of all these djeds, is master of the netters. When a man has liberated his netter, said the sage, he becomes an emitter like ptah and does the work of, quote, "those who are in their caves," unquote. That is, he shares the work of cosmic powers with the acquired consciousness of cosmic man. If I have really understood, said Her Bak, this is realization of the human Horus. Remembering that it isn't accomplishment in a moment, but by patient weaving of the Horus soul in the Osiris body. This occasioned Her Bak some surprise. Weaving? Is that what those famous fabrics, the steels, often refer to mean? It is one of their meanings. You will understand as well the meaning of the symbol Shems as applied to the followers of Horus. The curved point represents a falcon's head. The body is a tissue of thread, which is universal Horus, the word of divine Ra, taking consciousness and possession of the man in whom he is weaving the human Horus. It is thus he incarnates in man, bringing the supreme awakening to those who are ready for it. Horus is given many names. As many as the transient states between his quality as universal quickener and his realization in the man made perfect, through what he has gained in the course of existence. He is called Hor, the remote, as the Horus principle in course of becoming. He is called Hor Remet, as proceeding from man's members, and in this name he struggles with the enemy, the Sethian personality. It is he who gains consciousness of his member and functions, first on earth, then with greater difficulty in the island Nesursa. The enemy is that which resists the urge to freedom, clings to egocentricity. It is the principle of cohesion in the elements of the me that work against fusion with the universal consciousness of the divine Ka. When resistance is overcome, the personality is subdued to the higher Ka's divine reason. This is the conscious union of the two Kas that awakens the higher reason in man and promotes a coming together of intuitive knowledge and ideas. What I have just said concerns mastery by the spiritual being, that other part of the being which is, as it were, the fixed centre that becomes the dejet. This, purified, as I said, will be the agent of resurrection, the leaven that precipitates and fixes the spiritual being. Now, the divine Wat, the unity remade, will appear like the soul star, Venus, that unites perfect the dual fire in herself and accompanies Ra at his rising and setting. This perfect being, ever increasing his light, can at last be independent and self-radiant like an indestructible sun. Then there is nothing absurd about the texts that show a dead man as a star in the sky, Her Bak remarked. What is absurd is to mock at texts because one doesn't know how to read them. But may I ask where Horus is seated in myself? Haven't I shown you clearly that when this process reaches completion, he is your soul, Ba? Become conscious little by little in your incarnate Ka? Our texts tell you that, quote, he rises from your vertebrae, unquote, from the dual fire in them, that is, that, quote, he quickens your spiritual heart, opens your mouth and eyes to the real, unquote, that, quote, being realized in you and having at last stripped you of your transient names, freed you from the humanity that is in your members, unquote, he will, quote, reveal your true face, unquote, your face of Ma'at, and, quote, make you one of the Kas of universal Horus, unquote. But just as Horus, son of Isis and Osiris, undergoes many tests and regains his power stage by stage, so it is with him in humanity. The followers who weave him in themselves incarnate him little by little in their lower being as weft and warp, made a fabric by means of the shuttle. Having reflected, the disciple said, this is more than an explanation. It is a program for getting at the real aim of existence. But what happens to the dead man who hasn't got very far? He undergoes long tests in the duat. When his me is purged enough to become Sa, he awaits in the relative bliss of lower heavens. The moment of rebirth, spiritual or physical, his dwelling is in Meskhent, for it is she who preserves the memories of his acquired consciousness and the images of his aspirations, emotional or spiritual. This is what pictures showing a dead man's life in the other world as a reflection of his earthly life mean. If there is reincarnation, it is Meskhent who recalls the Ka that Sekhmet had freed. But I repeat what I said at the beginning of this lesson. It is the difficulty of describing states of spirit and consciousness in concrete terms that necessitates the use of so many images and symbols. Images are nearer reality than cold definitions. The symbols of the, quote, skins of rebirth, unquote, that preserve the consciousness of the being in the duat and pass it on to the future lives, is expressed in the image of the word birth, Mez, which depicts 3 jackal skins tied by the sign for the placenta. 3 skins, envelopes, on which I can't usefully now expand. In the ancient text that says, speaking of Meskhent's role, this house is the night of birth. Forgive me. This house, in this night of birth, is a jar. The word jar is as apt to the word skin. It confirms the meaning and gives it precision. I am only giving you now, said the sage after a silence, what is essential if you are to understand the writings of our masters, the mode in which they express the harmony and identity of function between the visible and invisible worlds. You may be sure that analogies between words and the play of letters can reveal the profound meaning of the mysteries of the duat. They named the constellations in the neighbourhood of the fixed point in the sky, the pole, which are always visible at night, imperishable. Among them are Meskhetiw, or Great Bear, and the hippopotamus that leans on a mooring post. Menit, stability. They liken Meskhent to the lower heavens, where metamorphosis takes place and rebirths are prepared. The word Sa, Orion, name of the constellation next to Soped, Sothis, is very close to Sa, the condition of the blessed, followers of Osiris. Each of the 3 constellations, Meskhetiw, Menit, Sa, has 7 principal stars, the number of every terrestrial and Osirian manifestation. But while Meskhetiw and Menit are always visible, turning on the fixed point of the northern sky, Sa Orion appears and disappears. It accompanies Soped Sothis in the south bank of the great stream, the band of the zodiac. It rises at the beginning of our winter and is seen in the night sky at the time of our feasts of Osiris in December, in opposition to the sun. Wisely did our masters liken Sa Orion to Osiris, for its annual cycle corresponds with the cycles of Osiris that rule Earth's vegetable life according to its distance from the sun. Their history is the history of the world since the creation of the primordial types, as it is written. Quote, O ferryman in the primordial world, take us speedily to the land where the netters were created at the beginning of the cycles. Unquote. The dead Sa, or it could be San, is submitted to cyclical alternations as Sa Orion to the seasons of Osiris. That is why it is said, quote, he was conceived with Sa Orion in the west and brought forth with him in the east. The alternations of the Osirian state are successive transitions from darkness into light, sojourns in the dark, west, rebirth into day. But rebirth needs a point of recall, which our masters liken to the action of the imperishables Meskhetiw and Menit, constellations that are identified with 3 principles. First, the principle of perpetuity, which links effects with fresh causes and leads memory consciousness to a rebirth determined by affinities with the Sars Ka. Second, the principle of stability shown in another symbol, the thigh of Osiris, the resurrection of which and re-erection of the pillar, the water of revitalization will ensue. Third, the principle of stability signified by the mooring post, which draws cars back to the affinity of their earthly djed or their spiritual djet. Menet is the port into which the boat returns to be moored. It is the swallow, the migrant that leaves its nest to return next year. Study once more the symbol of the djed, the pillar of Osiris, which alludes sometimes to the ending of these alternations by the inscriptions of two eyes surmounted by one single nefer instead of a third eye. If I have understood, said Her Bak after prolonged reflection, the way of Horus is a development and the term of the way of Osiris, to whom he brings deliverance. There is an image of the rebirth and straightening of the Jade pillar. It is the ascendancy of the spiritual sun, replied the master, that brings triumph. A sacred word says, quote, take the roads of the east, follow Ra, not Osiris. For the man who is tied to his house of earth dies. The man who leaves it and follows Horus Ra is unbound. Ra returns him not to Osiris, and he dies no more. The disciple was deeply moved. Although you have filled me to the brim during these 7 days, he said, my heart urges a last question. Is man condemned to follow this long road of disengagement and purification forever? The master hesitated. This is, in truth, the last question, he said at last. There is indeed a purpose of perfection in the first creation. The mystery of Horus Redeemer lies in it. The time of revelation is not yet, but there is nothing to stop seeking the way yourself. There is no higher science on earth.